So DoorDash released their earnings a few days ago, and I noticed one big thing in their earnings that stood out. DoorDash is having a really hard time bringing on board new drivers. Now, they've noted a couple of reasons for this. They're saying it's a short-term trend, but I think this is going to continue long-term. So according to DoorDash, one of the main drivers between the reason why they have the shortages was because the pandemic has increased demand for their delivery service. A lot of that can be attributed to the stimulus checks. People have more money coming in and they're spending this money. A lot of that's going towards DoorDash. They're staying in, watching Netflix, ordering food. But at the same time, DoorDash drivers are getting these stimulus checks, and there's less incentive to work when you're getting paid stimulus money more than what you'd be getting paid going out to work. Now, there's also unemployment funds, there's PPP loans, there's a lot of money going potentially into the hands of drivers, and drivers don't want to be getting paid $3 per delivery when they're actually getting paid quite a bit more to just sit back and relax. And so DoorDash has really just kind of brought into light the tip of the iceberg here, because as we've seen in the news lately, inflation is picking up across the board. It has been since the pandemic begun and we started seeing a lot of these stimulus packages coming out, but now it's finally showing up in the numbers. And what we've seen is some massive price increases that are going to continue to affect the supply of DoorDash drivers and of other delivery drivers. And two of those big ones are gas costs and also the cost to buy a used car. So unless you already have a used car, then you're not going to be as likely to go out and buy a car to start delivering, because in 2021, the cost of used cars has increased 21%. That's a huge gap up, and that makes it harder for new drivers to get into the market unless you're delivering on a bicycle or a scooter or something else. But we've known for a long time that the best means of transportation when you're delivering is to use a cheap used car. These are becoming really hard to get by. I noticed this myself when I sold my old car, the Mazda 3. You've probably seen it in old delivery videos. And I put it up on Facebook Marketplace. It had some issues with it, so I was really just trying to get rid of it. I put it up for $500, and I probably had 300 or 400 people message me about this car in the first 2 days. There's a lot of people looking for cheap cars, but there's not enough of them out there. And we also have to look at gasoline prices. You can also note in this article, it's a CNN article, that gas prices on average have hit above $3 per gallon, and that's really a psychological mark that starts to spook some consumers in places where they were getting cheap gas in the past. Now all of a sudden they've seen these dramatic increases, and some of that can be attributed to the pipeline shutdown, which is kind of a transient thing. As it reopens, we expect gas prices, whatever was attributed to that closure, to kind of come back down a little bit. But there are other inflation causes behind all commodities increasing in price, and this is something that's going to continue to hurt DoorDash drivers, Uber Eats drivers, Grubhub drivers, all of them, people looking to get out there on the road. So to basically connect the dots here, what do we have to see? Well, from these companies, from these apps that have essentially kind of put out this supply and demand model where drivers can make wages based upon how many people are ordering, delivering. If supply is higher, in theory, they're getting paid more. They've really set up this whole gig economy network so that it should move up and down with supply and demand. So we're really just looking at basic economic factors. But as more DoorDash drivers, as we're seeing them sit home and not deliver, what we're really going to need to see from DoorDash and other apps is an increase in wages. They need to essentially make earnings higher to account for these other increased costs of doing work, and to also lure drivers back in who might be just sitting at home with these stimulus checks. And so what we've probably seen here is an increase in bonuses to get new drivers on board, but that doesn't really translate into increased wages, because that's a one-time bonus. They kind of want to suck drivers in with that bonus, and then you're back to those lower wages and kind of get you hooked on the gamification of the system. But what we really need to see is a sustainable increase in prices over the long term. The prices, the cost of ordering food out delivery that's going to get passed on to the customers, and it's going to go back into those drivers' earnings and pockets. And that's what we need to see to bring more drivers back into the system. So what should you do here if you're a DoorDash delivery driver, if you deliver for Uber Eats, and you've kind of been sitting this one out, or you're still delivering, but you're not getting paid as much while this inflation increases? I've made videos about taking advantage of that free stimulus money that's out there, and whether or not you are in support of the stimulus, you do kind of have to take advantage of it because it shows up in inflation. Your life's going to get more expensive, so when there's opportunities out here to kind of take some of this money that's available to you and rightfully yours, then it's probably a good idea to take advantage of that, because things could potentially be getting more expensive down the road, and we don't know how long that's going to stick around for, if it really is transient like the Fed is saying, or if it's going to be around for a longer period of time. But one of the big things that I've noticed from talking to drivers actually on a vacation this last week, and I don't do any driving for Uber or Lyft, that's not something I've done since like 2015, but from speaking to drivers, what they're saying is that wages are increasing quite a bit there. There's quite a bit of demand throughout the day. If you live in a place where people are vacationing, the fact that the stimulus took a lot of drivers off of the map has led to pay and demand increases for Lyft and Uber drivers. So they're getting pretty steady paychecks right now. Not to mention that the cost of used cars, the cost of buying any cars, has increased quite a bit. And what this is doing is this is locking up those rental car companies. Essentially, they can't buy. Essentially, what they did is they offloaded a lot of their fleets early in the pandemic because travel crashed, and now the cost of these used cars has really skyrocketed, and they're not able to buy back as many new cars, as many used cars to bulk up their fleets. So it's hard to get a rental car when you're on vacation right now, and you really have to be using Lyft or Uber. So if you're in that good position where you can really be driving your car for Lyft or Uber, or doing delivery, if you have a new enough vehicle, I would say take advantage of that. It's true, not a lot of us are, but if that's an option, I would look into it. If you've put Lyft and Uber off for a long time, a lot of people do that because of decrease in payment, decrease in wages. Take another look at that. You do really have to be very flexible if you're doing gigs. As this is supply and demand focused, you do have to be ready to hop on whatever type of gig is paying the most at any point in time. I do kind of foresee these companies having to increase wages for delivery drivers. I think DoorDash, Uber Eats are going to have to. They might try and be tricky and use more of these sign-up bonuses to get drivers on, and then try and keep them on, whatever they do within the app to gamify that. But I think that we're going to have to see some long-term wage increases. So if you're wondering, if it's looking tough for you right now with gas prices, I would say be patient, because hopefully we'll see some of that coming through soon. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel.